It started off like any other quiet weekend morning. My wife and I were just settling in, enjoying the rare peace in our new neighborhood, one that came with promises of security. Calm streets and supposedly friendly neighbors. But if there's one thing we didn't count on, it was meeting her so soon, HOA Karen. The self-appointed queen of the cul-de-sac. You know the type. Clipboard in hand, nose in everyone's business, convinced she's the law of the land. We had heard murmurs from a few neighbors during move-in week, but nothing prepared us for what was about to unfold right at our front door. It began with a knock, sharp, impatient, and followed by a voice that sounded like it had never been told no before. Karen wanted access to our backyard. She claimed she had the right to inspect it because she ran things in the neighborhood. My wife calmly told her, no, firm, respectful, and within her full right as a homeowner. That's when Karen snapped. Within seconds, she pulled out her phone, looked my wife dead in the eyes, and said the words that sent chills down my spine. "I'm calling 911. You're obstructing an HOA inspection." Now here's the part Karen didn't know my wife. She's not just new to the neighborhood. She's the newly appointed chief of police for our city. Freshly transferred, low profile, and not one to flash a badge unless absolutely necessary. But standing there, accused by someone drunk on imaginary power, she had to make a choice. Let the situation play out or reveal who she really was. What happened next was nothing short of unbelievable. Let's just say Karen's call didn't exactly go the way she thought it would. And the look on her face when the truth came out. You'll want to see it for yourself, as Karen stood there with her phone pressed tightly to her ear. Pacing in our driveway like she was running the entire city, my wife remained calm, too calm. Really? She didn't raise her voice, didn't flash her badge, didn't even mention her role. She just kept her hands relaxed by her sides. Watching as Karen loudly described a suspicious woman who was refusing to cooperate with a supposed HOA directive. It would have been comical if it wasn't so uncomfortable. Meanwhile, I was frozen, unsure whether to step in or just let this disaster unfold. Now, here's what made the whole thing even stranger. We had only lived in this neighborhood for about a week. We hadn't even unpacked everything yet. No official welcome, no introduction from the HOA board. Just some cold stares and subtle glances from a few houses down the street. Karen was the first one to approach us directly, though it felt more like an ambush than a welcome. As the minutes ticked by and Karen kept up her dramatic performance for the 911 dispatcher, I noticed something odd. Few neighbors had started peeking through their blinds. One guy across the street even stepped out onto his porch with a cup of coffee, pretending to check the weather. It was clear this wasn't the first time Karen had caused a scene, but it might be the first time she picked the wrong person. My wife finally spoke, calmly, clearly, and with just enough firmness to make Karen pause. "You really don't want to go down this road," she said. Karen scoffed, waving her off like she was just another stubborn rule breaker. But in that moment, I knew something bigger was brewing. Karen had no idea who she was dealing with. The officers who were now on their way, they definitely would, while Karen continued her loud phone call. My wife and I exchanged a quick glance, one filled with a mix of frustration and disbelief. This wasn't just about a nosy neighbor anymore. Felt like a test of boundaries, power, and respect. Karen's obsession with control seemed to extend far beyond HOA guidelines. She acted like she had the neighborhood on lockdown, but the truth was, she had no real authority beyond her own inflated sense of importance. Behind the scenes, my wife had been juggling a lot. Taking on the role of police chief in a new city meant balancing community expectations and internal politics, all while trying to stay low-key during these first few weeks. The last thing she needed was a local drama escalating because someone like Karen refused to back down. Still, She knew she couldn't ignore it not when this incident could spiral out of control and potentially damage her reputation before she even settled in. Meanwhile, Karen's call to 911 was raising eyebrows in the neighborhood. Some residents quietly sympathized with my wife, especially after hearing bits of Karen's exaggerated story through the open windows. Others were unsure who to believe, caught in the tension between wanting peace and fearing Karen's wrath. The HOA meetings, already tense, were about to become even more heated. Then there was the question of why Karen felt so threatened by my wife. Was it just the badge? Or was there something deeper in insecurity about losing control or being challenged? It was clear Karen's need to assert dominance went beyond simple HOA rules. She wanted to be the gatekeeper, the one who dictated how things ran. And my wife refusing her entry disrupted that narrative. As the sound of approaching sirens grew louder, the weight of the situation settled over us. The confrontation was far from over, and no one knew what would happen when the officers arrived. Would Karen's bluff be called? Or would the neighborhood be shaken by a clash none of us expected? The sirens grew closer, echoing down the quiet streets like a storm about to break. Karen's face twisted into a smug smile as if victory was already hers. Convinced the police would side with her over a defiant homeowner, she kept talking on the phone, describing my wife in a way that didn't match the calm, collected woman standing just a few feet away. But I could see a flicker of doubt in Karen's eyes, a small crack in her armor, as if she was starting to realize this wasn't going to be as simple as she thought. My wife stayed steady, her posture unshaken. Yet I could feel the tension in the air thickening. The neighbors were out now, some whispering quietly, others holding their phones ready, sensing that whatever happened next would change the neighborhood dynamic forever. There was an unspoken question hanging between us. All how far would Karen push this? And how much was my wife willing to reveal? The police cruisers finally pulled up, lights flashing, but no blaring sirens. A quiet but firm arrival that instantly commanded attention. Officers stepped out cautiously, scanning the scene. They clearly hadn't been fully briefed yet, probably just told about a complaint from the HOA. What they didn't know was standing right there, quietly ready to show them the truth. Karen approached the lead officer, her voice sharp and loud, painting a picture of obstruction and suspicion. But as my wife stepped forward, badge discreetly clipped to her belt, the atmosphere shifted. The officers exchanged glances, sensing something beneath the surface, something more serious than a neighborhood squabble. I could feel my heart pounding. This wasn't just about HOA rules anymore. It was about power, respect, and the fine line between order and chaos. As Karen's grip on the situation started to slip, the neighborhood held its breath, waiting to see how it would all unfold. Would the truth come out? Or would Karen's stubbornness ignite a conflict none of us were ready for? Just as the officers began to ask questions, a sudden interruption shifted everything. From behind the group of curious neighbors, a man stepped forward, calm but with an edge that made everyone pause. He introduced himself as the HOA president, someone no one had really seen before, and his presence instantly changed the tone of the gathering. What caught us off guard was the unexpected alliance, he revealed. Karen wasn't acting alone. She had been rallying a small but vocal faction within the HOA board, all eager to push their own agenda, one that didn't include transparency or fairness. Suddenly, the whole situation wasn't just about one overzealous neighbor calling 911. It was about a deeper conflict threatening the community's peace. The HOA president claimed there were ongoing disputes about property access, landscaping rules, and even alleged security concerns that Karen had been blowing out of proportion. His words hinted at years of simmering tension, and my wife's arrival in the neighborhood seemed to have triggered something far bigger than anyone expected. The officers exchanged looks, clearly weighing the new information against what they'd been told by Karen. Meanwhile, Karen herself grew visibly uneasy, glancing toward the HOA president as if realizing she might have underestimated how much support or opposition she truly faced. Were rising fast. For my wife, this wasn't just a matter of handling a disruptive neighbor anymore. It was becoming a test of leadership, integrity, and the challenge of navigating politics both inside the force and within a community that was clearly divided. The neighbors watching now weren't just spectators. They were part of a story unfolding in real time, caught between loyalty and the hope for real change, with tensions mounting and secrets starting to surface. The question lingered in the air. How far would Karen and her allies go to maintain control? And what price would we pay? If this neighborhood power struggle spiraled out of control? The air grew thick with tension as my wife stepped forward, her voice steady but firm. She calmly identified herself as the new police chief, showing her badge to the officers and the crowd. The surprise was immediate. Karen's smug expression faltered, and the HOA president's confident stance wavered. Suddenly, the story Karen had been spinning unraveled. The officers looked at each other, realizing this was no ordinary neighborhood dispute. This was a test of authority and truth. My wife explained that while HOA rules mattered, no one had the right to intimidate or falsely accuse a resident, not by calling emergency services without cause. The officers, now fully aware of her position, gently reminded Karen and the HOA president that misuse of 911 could have serious consequences. Karen's allies shifted uneasily, and a few neighbors began murmuring their support for my wife's calm but commanding approach. Just when it seemed like the conflict would settle, the unexpected twist hit. One of the neighbors stepped forward, revealing she had secretly recorded part of Karen's phone call to 911. The recording exposed Karen exaggerating and threatening unnecessary escalation, undermining her claims completely. The revelation spread quickly through the crowd, turning public opinion sharply against Karen and her faction. Faced with mounting pressure, Karen stammered, unable to regain control. And the HOA president was forced to call for a formal meeting to address the neighborhood's concerns. My wife, with her steady leadership, promised to help bridge the divide and restore trust. Not just as police chief, but as a neighbor who wanted peace for everyone. As the crowd began to disperse, the feeling was clear. This neighborhood would never be the same. Karen's reign of control was broken, but beneath the surface, old wounds remained, hinting at future challenges. The real work was just beginning. After the recording came to light, things shifted quickly. Karen's boldness was replaced by awkward silence as neighbors whispered among themselves, finally seeing the truth behind her aggressive behavior. The HOA president, realizing the situation had spiraled out of control, agreed to pause all pending neighborhood inspections and promised a full review of HOA procedures. It was clear that the old way of doing things, ruling through intimidation and secrecy, was no longer going to fly. My wife stepped into the role the community needed, not just as police chief, but as someone who listened. She arranged a meeting where neighbors could voice their concerns openly, without fear of retaliation. Slowly, walls started coming down. People who had felt powerless before began to feel heard, and the neighborhood began to shift toward cooperation and respect. What started as a tense confrontation over backyard access revealed something deeper: the importance of community, transparency, and fairness. It reminded us all that rules are meant to protect, not control. And while HOA guidelines help keep neighborhoods orderly, they should never be a tool for bullying or exclusion. In the end, Karen's call to 911 didn't bring the outcome she expected. Instead, it sparked a change that strengthened the neighborhood bonds and showed the power of standing up calmly and confidently for what's right. The story is a reminder that authority is most effective when paired with respect and understanding. And sometimes, the people who seem like obstacles can become catalysts for positive change, though the drama is over. My wife and I know the work of building trust and community is ongoing. But for now, there's a sense of hope, the quiet peace we had hoped for when we first moved in. The neighborhood isn't perfect, but it's ours, and we're ready to face whatever comes next. Together.